I wanted to first talk about the Kursk Offensive. There's been a lot of enthusiasm about this, but in all of this enthusiasm, especially in the Western mainstream media, there has been indications of major problems, especially on the Ukraine side. And I wanted to ask you, the New York Times reported today admitting using a host of various Carnegie Endowment Foundation, so-called scholars and military experts, talking about how Ukraine actually is in deep trouble the longer that this goes on. And of course, a lot of this has to do with the fact that Russia was always going to respond, and that the longer that Ukraine digs into this literal NATO-backed invasion, the more likely it is that this will be destroyed. What is happening right now in this Kursk offensive, Andrei, and what does it spell for Ukraine and, of course, the larger Ukraine project NATO is waging?
Well, we need to keep in mind that before we use those large words like offensive, it wasn't really not an offensive. It was the incursion into the what in tactical and operational terms described as the forefield or the cover zone of any force. It's usually, depending on the size of the force, between 10 to 20 kilometers, something like that. This is the zone where any army wants, be them starting from the brigade to division level, they want you to deploy your force to build yourself, into columns, and then, this cover zone becomes the zone of the active combat. They had this about 11 kilometers of the fields and some forests. They did what it was, incursion, essentially a raid in the, I would say, well, not brigade. Initially it started in battalion size. Now it went into brigade size incursion. They encountered the first line of defense of Russian armed forces. They broke through, obviously, a very small tripwire force of the border guards. And now we see what was about to happen. And it did happen. And we're looking at the complete annihilation of this so-called offensive, as if there was any other outcome, So, and what can I say? Yet again, London and Washington parade themselves as military amateurs who they say they never had anything to do with this. Everybody understands they planned it, and there was a blessing on part of these two capitals to do this. And yes, I looked at today's development. A number of the equipment dropped kind of significantly, annihilated or destroyed on the Ukrainian side, because they simply ran out of the most of this armor. And now basically what is happening, that is why it was called not troops operation, which is usually the whole army deal, with the march of the reserves, and it's essentially the, martial law is established. No, it's counter-terrorist operation. This is precisely what it is. The groups, including the diversionary recon groups, larger diversionary recon groups of Russian army, they literally have to extricate those guys in hiding in forests, and it's a grim situation. The slaughter there of the Ukrainian forces is just absolutely unimaginable. Literally piles of bodies. And it's not figure of speech. You can look it up. It's all over social media. And they now beg in the radio channels to extricate them, but it's impossible anymore. And they will die most likely, or surrender, as many of them do. So it's ended bad for them.
Yes, there were intimations from many critical of NATO and the Ukraine project that this was a trap set by Russia, but it appears that this is almost like a self-made trap set by NATO, because as you said, Andrei, this is fully backed by NATO. And I just want to pull up what the New York Times said at the very end of their article, titled here, "Russia seeks to turn humbling incursion into military gains." You scroll to the end And here you have ultimately the expansion of the war into new areas will, over time, favor the side with bigger resources that Russian analysts have said. With triple the population and a larger industrial base, that side remains Russia. So, Andrei, given this, why then take part in such a catastrophic incursion? Why do this when the result was maybe foretold?
Well, first, there are many people who sit at Ramstein base and in Brussels and other bunkers in already Polish territory who plan this. On American part, it's three-star General Aguto and a bunch of his, the operational planners from Pentagon. I'm not talking about London. Nobody from British military can be taken seriously because this is a joke. I mean, they don't have experience. They don't have understanding of the modern war. And of course, they don't know Russia. Even this piece of the from New York Times, the conclusion, the phrase tells you how much they are detached from the reality because there is no really big industrial base left in Ukraine. And in terms of population, Russia is about 7.5 times larger because latest data testifies to the fact that probably 20 million people are left now only in Ukraine, because there are millions of them who, just escaped the country. And of course, you understand that also what it lost 4 critical oblast regions on the east. So, yeah, it's, it's operational art. Pure and simple. There is operational planning, which is, of course, almost precise science, but then there is an operational art. This is when you play with your large operational strategic level, formations, and you make even your own sometimes setback, you make it into the political and military triumph. This is exactly what happened. I don't think so. There was a trap. There was from what I know, I'm not going to expand on this for now. I need the confirmation, but I know it's with a high degree of veracity, so to speak, that there was a real screw up on the part of the Kursk civilian administration. And this is already being kind of, investigated. But army performed as army performs. That's what they do. And yeah, come on. The Russian army is probably, arguably, well, not arguably, it's the best army in the world right now. And the question is now what Russians are going to do. And I can tell you immediately, it's not just buffer zone. It's probably going to be the Sumy Oblast from where this whole thing originated. Eventually will fall to Russia too. Not that Russians really want it, but, it is what it is.
Right. What have you made about the talk about Vladimir Putin and how he's responded and how overall Russia has responded to this incursion? Because there's been a lot of enthusiasm in the collective West, especially in the media, talking about how not only was the particular civilian administration that you're talking about caught by surprise, but really the entirety of Russia's forces were caught by surprise, and that this has changed the course of the conflict, especially in the realm of how Russia portrays itself in this conflict. What do you make of all of that? Because for so many days, there were talks about Vladimir Putin being furious and wanting revenge. And then now they're talking about Vladimir Putin being very calm in his response to this incursion. What have you made of this chatter?
Well, I can make only one thing about it, and I am on record for a decade. NATO is militarily incompetent, all their planners and all that. And, you don't have to go far to understand that these people who planned this whole debacle for NATO and the combined West and Ukraine. So the only thing they are good at are narratives. That's the only thing. And those narratives are run, if you look attentively at people of the caliber of Petraeus or Keane and, those people who continue to parade themselves as their, incompetence, that's the only thing they can do. They love to make those great, grandiose statements while having no understanding what kind of force they are dealing with, what are strategic imperatives for Russia. They just narrate. That's what they do. They make this up. It's an echo chamber. They still, they still just salivate on their, beating the crap out of this, 5-year-old in the sandbox, Saddam's army, and thinking that this was the thing. That they are shown really what modern war is. And again, Russia is not employing all of its might. It's just doing all things necessary to achieve, which now is the political objective much larger than Ukraine. We're looking at a global shift in balance of power. And these people didn't get the message. They believe their own, their own narratives, okay? They, propaganda, they bought it themselves. And they are paying this for now. And now, of course, what they do, the whole media complex, essentially it's military-industrial congressional media complex. That's how it's being called correctly. They have some people say, they don't want to, wars to have any kind of conclusion, but they just want them perpetual war because they make money on this. Well, that's all fine and dandy, but not in case with Russia, because you're losing your reputation as the, technological and military power. And that's exactly what had happened. And now, if you look attentively at this incursion, which it is incursion, it never reached beyond the 150 square kilometers. Evidently, they are also mathematically and geographically challenged. And you will see yourself, it's literally littered with NATO issues, of hardware. Today, yet another Abrams was burned. You look at those Bradleys and you look at those Marders and everything, they're just burned all over the place there. That's what it is. And it doesn't perform at all. And fact is, Russians are really glad that they also have been allowed to kill more patriots. And there you go.
Yeah. Well, there's been kind of this incursion, the enthusiasm around it appears to be maybe a shift in how Ukraine is being pushed to fight this conflict, because we've heard, I believe, even in just, this is August 21st, so even in just the last 24 hours or so, they've tried to invade Bryansk.
Yeah,
and before that, they tried Belgorod. It hasn't been successful. But is this something we're seeing where Ukraine is going to be diverting its NATO hardware and whatever's left of its army to Russia and to Russia's border? Is that the new phase here of how they're going to fight?
No. Diversionary recon groups have been in and out constantly since the start of the special military operation. So let's not kind of mistake things like breakthrough and brigade-sized force, which still ended up in catastrophe. We're talking about, some people say it was almost company and a half size diversionary recon group, which tried to get into Bryansk region. It was obviously killed, repelled. But that's what many people do not understand about Kursk. General Staff was viewing three of them, Belgorod, Kursk, and Bryansk, from the get-go as potential breakthrough points for some force of the armed forces of Ukraine. They were equiprobable. That means what? Each of them had the same probability of the incursion. So, it happened in Kursk, and as I already stated, it is more, a lot of questions will be towards civilian administration. But people in Belgorod and Bryansk were ready. And army doesn't stand on the border. Many people do not understand. The border guards stand on the border. They have what it called the units, or basic tactical formation, not formation, it's a unit called Zastava, which is literally watch point. It's usually an enforced platoon type operation. It's tripwire essentially, and those Zastavas, so to speak, they placed along the border, and they serve as the initial units, which usually take the brunt of the first assault, depending on the force. But army stands within in the depth, and it usually starts because obviously these are border districts. Now they are deployed somewhat between 10 to 15 kilometers in depth. And then after that, once something happens, they begin to redeploy towards the enemy. And this time they, as I already stated, the farthest they got was something like 12 and a half kilometers. And again, people look at the map, they don't understand. This is not how it happens. The map should be drawn not in some kind of the solid color things. It should be drawn in those spots where the units formations are located. And Bryansk today, they said up to 200 personnel they tried to penetrate, been met with the fire, lost many people. Nothing new. Russians do the same, actually. So it's diversionary recon groups. That's what they do.
Right. All right. Then we have a situation here for the last several months where NATO, it feels like this was what happened in Kursk, while we couldn't have necessarily predicted it would happen. There's been so many indications from the United States and from NATO that they were going to green light Ukrainian attacks on Russian soil. They've been happening, but it seems like the green lighting of it was an indication that they would escalate, they would get larger. How does Russia respond to what seems to be something that's going to occur more frequently as Ukraine gets more and more desperate? And of course, as the US and NATO become more desperate in trying to keep this whole thing together, how does Russia respond?
No, I mean, they want to provoke Russia into some larger response, because obviously the United States needs to get the hell out of this mess which it created, together with these chihuahuas in London. But the point is, Russia has no, intention to drive now, let's say, attack Poland. Although today, with the attempt, it was the Cessna knockoff by Poland, A-22, that's how it's called. They tried to launch it at Olenigorsk, at the main air base in Murmansk region. It was obviously shut down, but that's the only thing they can do. They can provoke. They don't have resources. They don't have capability to fight Russia conventionally. And it's all about narratives. It's all about poking and pretending. Some people in London, including through their media, they think that it's United Kingdom invasion of Russia. This is how pathetic those people are. They're just downright morons, So they are small people. They try to, just measure up to the Gulliver. But, what can I say? None of them, NATO doesn't have resources to fight serious conventional war in Eastern Ukraine, not only Eastern Ukraine, Eastern Europe. And that is why they will do those escalations, trying to provoke Russia at something, trying to get something in those, opaque, murky waters, to get some political things, because the only thing they know, and you have to understand, all Western elites, without exception, from Washington to Berlin to London, they don't know how to run state. They don't know what statesmanship is. The only thing which they are driven by internal political dynamics and interest, as related to their ambition and desire to stay in power through their, faking elections. That's pretty much it.
Now, lastly, on the battlefield front, Andrei, I wanted to ask about the recent gains that are occurring for Russia during this Kursk incursion. It's one of the things that I think is now shocking the Western mainstream media. They're coming to terms with this reality that Russia has now taken the area called New York. They're moving towards Pokrovsk, and
4 kilometers away.
right, and the front line, it appears, for Ukraine is collapsing. Talk about how Russia has been able to do this while the Western mainstream media has made it appear like Russia is the one that is being overextended and Russia is the one that has been exposed here. How has it been exposed if it seems like the front line remains in Russia's favor all throughout this incursion?
The whole idea of these amateurs from London, from their general staff, and again, London wouldn't be able to, invade Leeds, let alone invade Russia. And these people, they are one-trick ponies. They are rigid. They don't know military history. They don't study it properly. Because obviously, you understand, British think that they defeated Hitler, Americans think that they defeated Hitler, and yeah, there's some those sideshow, those Ruskies, those Red Army, that helps somewhat. When you have your whole knowledge base based around it, and when you have former Wehrmacht losers writing you your field manuals, this is the expected result. And none of them, they know what Russia is economically, militarily, culturally. And so they operate under rigid operational views. For example, okay, let's do the incursion in Kursk, okay? So that means that Russians will be forced to, remove some of the reserves from their other axis, operational axis, and that will make life for whatever remains of the armed forces of Ukraine easier. They are primitive thinkers. As I already stated, their most understanding about war is from Hollywood. And so suddenly, knowing that they, thinking that what should happen, they don't understand how Russian reserves work. And as a result, Russians transferred elements of the Akhmat Brigade and 810th Marine Brigade, Naval Infantry Brigade, and some elements of the special forces of the special operations. But instead of that, and guess what? Not only didn't slow down anything, it's actually accelerated. You look at Pokrovsk, it's a catastrophe there. You're absolutely correct. There is another cauldron which was formed. So we have now the advancement towards Kupiansk, and they have to sit now and ask themselves a question: how many times should we miscalculate? Well, you have to learn the military science properly, but they don't. They invented this military history, this confabulated thing. Again, look at American military record. It loses wars to the left and to the right, to everybody. And starting from Korea. And then you suddenly recognize that you have to fight the now most advanced military in the world. And even they have a huge advantage. They have ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance complex, which is unimpeded, especially the satellite constellation. In real war, that satellite constellation will be suppressed. But even with that, they cannot do anything. And guess what? Yeah, you're absolutely correct. On Pokrovsk, we have a catastrophe there for armed forces of Ukraine. Russian forces now are within 4 kilometers from Pokrovsk, which is a very critical, actually, the transportation hub. And it has everything to do with the logistics of the major sector of the Ukrainian front. Now you have Kupiansk, Russians going back to Kupiansk. And once they are in Kupiansk, that means that they will be on the shores of the Oskol River. And once you cross Oskol River, my God, the things change dramatically. I mean, strategically. No, they already have been changing, but strategically. And yes, now they have to ask the question, why didn't they do their homework? I can tell you why. They swallowed hook, line, and sinker Ukrainian propaganda. So there you go. So, and that tells you the professional level of those people in Pentagon and in London. That means they cannot even distinguish where is their outright BS and where there is some grain of truth. But when you look attentively at as I already stated, at the academic and operational level of American generals, this is pathetic, man. And not to mention the fact that many of them, they don't even have the fundamental military education. Some of them graduated West Point. But other than that, my gosh, these are people who have all kinds of degrees, ranging from sociology to, to biology. Good God, how are you going to fight in the war of the 21st century? And that's what is happening right now.
Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate all of your support. This channel, however, needs your help. I am seeking to make this channel more sustainable in the long term and upgrade necessary equipment to ensure that this work continues onward and makes progress to give you all of the geopolitical analysis that you all deserve. For that reason, I'm asking you to become a member of my Patreon community at patreon.com/DannyDhaiphong. You can find that link in the video description or in the pinned comment below. For whatever amount you choose to give, just know you are supporting independent media that you can't find anywhere else. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the next video.